Hello and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm counting down my top 10 Woody Allen films. Now these days it's not very fashionable to be into Woody Allen, is it? For two reasons really. Partly because many people feel that his films for about 30 years have been pretty terrible, but secondly because of all the stuff with Dylan Farrow. Now, I don't want to go on bang on about that in this video, but suffice to say, when Britain's leading leftist newspaper, The Guardian, takes out a four-page article written by Hadley Freeman to pick apart the case of Dylan Farrow and show how unlikely it is that Woody Allen abused her, well, I think that is very telling. I'm increasingly of the belief that Woody Allen really was a scapegoat for a particular political and ideological moment, but whatever. I don't know, I wasn't there, nor was anyone else except Woody Allen and Dylan Farrow, so let's leave it to them and let's concentrate on the movies. The thing is, though, it was always a bit unfashionable in certain circles to be into Woody Allen, particularly in America and New York, where some of the critics had a real downer on Woody Allen. They felt he presented a sort of nice, cleaned up portrait of Manhattan, full of middle class people, no working class people, that Woody Allen didn't make enough political or social comment, that it was a sort of nice, charming, cinema for middle class people with all the horrible bits shaved out. A very important American film critic called Jonathan Rosenbaum, he actually took out an article in the late 1980s called Notes on Devaluing Woody Allen. What a miserable thing to do. What kind of peevish thing to do, mean-spirited thing to do. I mean, on this channel, for example, if I didn't like a director, I wouldn't do a whole video saying how much I dislike them. I'd just ignore them. But Rosenbaum felt it was necessary to say we must not like Woody Allen. That's how much Woody Allen was held in contempt by certain writers in America. They were almost embarrassed by him. He didn't have the rawness of someone like Cassavetes. He wasn't investigating what was happening in America like people like Scorsese and Coppola. He was felt to be this kind of light dramatist working in a middle-class milieu. I must admit, I did have these doubts myself when in the 2000s a movie came out called Match Point. It was the first film Woody Allen made outside America, and he made it in Britain, and it was set in London, supposedly modern contemporary London. But when I went to see it at the cinema, it was a serious film, one of Woody Allen's most serious films. He's not actually in it, it's a drama, a sort of murder mystery drama. And it started to provoke giggles in the audience. As a British audience member, this vision of London was like something out of the 1930s. It was ludicrous, and the dialogue felt so brittle and like it had been learnt from movies, The main character, played by Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, felt so stilted and so unreal. Of course, Rosenbaum, the critic who'd sort of taken out this article devaluing Woody Allen, actually liked Match Point and thought it was one of Woody Allen's better films, showing perhaps his lack of knowledge of London, although he had lived in London in the 1970s. So perhaps in some ways, I see what those critics in America were talking about. Match Point to me was an idealised vision of England which had nothing to do with reality. And perhaps that's what they were arguing about with Woody Allen's Manhattan movies. I do wonder though, is there a bit of peevishness, almost a bit of envy on behalf of those critics who criticised Woody Allen in America? Because after all, Woody Allen's romances and his discussions of life, the universe and everything have affected and entertained more people across more classes in more countries than their criticism has ever reached. Perhaps a controversial point, but something worth thinking about. Anyway, my own love of Woody Allen really began when I was a teenager, and I discovered his films watching them with my father. And I loved Woody Allen, A, because he made me laugh. I still think some of his films are some of the funniest I've ever seen. But B, and I may as well admit this, right, he became a bit of a role model for me. He became a bit of a role model because he was this little ugly guy who got the women. I was agog. How does he do it? How does he do it? He does it because he's intelligent and he's witty and he's funny. This was amazing to me. It's opened up a whole new world of possibilities and hope. And so I adored Woody Allen films. Here was this clever guy who was interested in death and philosophy, who was witty with women, who could get all these beautiful women like Diane Keaton and Mia Farrow. This was my path into life. In the 80s, there was Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. They were your male role models. No thanks. I'll take Woody Allen. Now, these days, probably people would look at me a bit askance for saying that, but that's how I felt about it. And I learnt a lot from Woody Allen films. I remember watching Hannah and Her Sisters when I was about 14. And there's this line, Max von Sydow has this line, he says to Barbara Hershey, he says, "My God, you've been kissed tonight." And I was there as this 14-year-old boy thinking, you can tell a girl's been kissed just by looking at her lips? This terrified me. I know I had sleepless nights about it for days. I was a very innocent young boy. But I learnt a lot from Woody Allen. So he became a huge figure in my life and a huge filmmaker for me. When you look at Woody Allen's career, it's an extraordinary career. Going back to the 1960s, he started out as a comedian, and he was a very nervous comedian. He had almost had no sort of act, but his jokes were brilliant. People forget that he's one of the great comic writers to come out of America since the late 50s. And he wrote for a lot of people. He was incredibly versatile. But then he honed his act, and he actually made his awkwardness part of the act. And if you go back and watch Woody Allen in his nightclub act, he's brilliant. He's such a great stand-up comedian. The moose joke, his most famous joke, I'll try and provide a link to it. It's a great set-piece joke. It's so good, and he delivers it brilliantly. He always had a love of film, and he became a filmmaker, and he made comic movies, the early funny ones as they're known now. And they're still very funny. Take the Money and Run, Bananas, Sleeper. They're great fun. Honestly, go back and watch them. They still make me laugh, and they're very enjoyable. But then he matured, and sort of the key film, I suppose, is Annie Hall, where he started to develop his own brand, unique at the time, of romance and comedy and drama all mixed together. And he got an Oscar for it. One of the very few films that actually deserved an Oscar, in my opinion, in the year of Star Wars. And then he built that, and he built that. And then, in 1991, 1992, came the sort of watershed moment of Woody Allen's career. I have to confess, when I found out that he'd been having an affair with Sunyi Previn, Mia Farrow's adopted daughter, I lost a bit of faith in him. I thought it was a rather grubby, rather seedy thing to be doing. Okay, he's married her and they've enjoyed 30 years together. But I mean, I did lose a bit of faith in that. I thought it was a bit cheap, a bit grubby. And you know what? I think it affected Woody Allen as well. Because frankly, since that point, Husbands and Wives and Manhattan Murder Mystery, you could almost cut a line in Woody Allen's filmography. And from that point onwards, he's nowhere near as good. He's had a 30-year decline of just churning out little movies that are not really worth very much. Every so often someone says, oh, Woody Allen's back on form, this is Woody Allen back to his best. It never is, actually. I've enjoyed some of the movies of the last 30 years, but they're nowhere close to his great period between Annie Hall in 1977 and Husbands and Wives Manhattan Murder Mystery in the early 90s. Husbands and Wives, arguably, his most ambitious and mature film as an adult artist. And then this news broke about Sunyi Previn, and it seemed to break Woody Allen. And he seemed to retreat into easy comfort material. You know, he didn't really seem to test himself much from beyond that point, in my opinion. Anyway, that's my look at his career. One more thing I want to say in this introduction before we go into the films proper. What is the quality of Woody Allen as a filmmaker? Is he one of the great filmmakers? Is he someone who's advanced cinema or changed the way we think about cinema? No, that would be ridiculous. But is he a bad filmmaker? Absolutely not. And to people who say that are foolish. He knows what he's doing. He's a very good writer, he's a brilliant director of actors, and he constructs stories that work really well. Let me put it this way. I remember reading a British critic called Gilbert Adair, who I like very much. And he was talking about light classical. Light classical is it's a genre of music. It's like classical music, it's like Beethoven or whatever, Mozart. But it doesn't have that extraordinary depth and power of the great composers, But it has its own grace and beauty. It's not as ambitious as Beethoven or Mozart or whatever, Bach. It's not got that sort of originality or the power of the form and changing of melody and harmony, but it has its own clarity and cleanness and beauty, and sometimes can be quite affecting and moving. Woody Allen is light classical. He knows how to make a movie. He's very good. His economy of how he tells his stories is brilliant. He can take a disparate group of actors who come from very different acting traditions and put them together as an ensemble cast, and you completely buy into them. There's a great deal of skill in doing that. And we're going to look at that skill in some of the movies we're going to talk about. He's a light classical director. He directs in a very classical, very modest style. Some people might call it cold. I call it sort of refined and poised. He's not sort of throwing you into the movie, nor is he sort of, rigorously formal in his approach. It's just a delicate classical style. And I think he does it very, very well. Okay, let's get on with the list. At number 10 is the last film, I think, that is a really great film in Woody Allen's filmography. And even this film, in some ways, I think was a comfort blanket on the breaking out of the Sonia Previn affair. It's Manhattan Murder Mystery. And this is Woody Allen retreating into his comfort zone. It's almost like his Sunday afternoon movie. And it brings back Diane Keaton, his great muse, in my opinion, and Alan Alda, who's so perfect for Woody Allen's movies. And it's a little story about Diane Keaton and Woody Allen think the guy next door has murdered his wife. And Woody Allen doesn't want to get involved, but Alan Alda takes up Diane Keaton's interest. And then Woody Allen starts to worry that Diane Keaton and Alan Alda are getting too close together. So that's the sort of amusing, light-hearted gag of the film. And it's simply gorgeous. You're watching three great comic actors at the height of their craft, just enjoying themselves. And it's just great fun. It's a bit indulgent, but it's lovely. It's a lovely movie. If you're a Woody Allen fan, it's catnip. My ninth place, in 1990, Woody Allen got together two other New York filmmakers and himself, the others were Scorsese and Coppola, to make a sort of portmanteau film, all stories set in New York. It's called New York Stories. Personally, I don't much care for the Scorsese and Coppola segments. The Coppola segment is amazingly terrible. But the Woody Allen segment is called Oedipus Rex. It's fantastic, and it's actually one of the funniest things Woody Allen ever did. It's great. It's about 40 minutes long. And what happens in it is Woody Allen's mum disappears in this magic act, and then suddenly she's blown up like this huge spirit that looms over New York, telling all these New Yorkers about her son and what he's up to in his life, and completely ruins Woody Allen's life. It's fantastic. It's so funny. It's a brilliant conceit. It's brilliantly paced, very funny. And also one of the great joys of this little film, if you can find it, is Woody Allen eventually ends up with the woman who us Woody Allen fans think perhaps was a perfect fit for him, Julie Kavner. You remember who does the voice of Marge in The Simpsons? That great, 60-a-day voice, Marge. And she's just perfect for Woody Allen, and it's great to see them brought together. It's a very funny scene. Julie Kavner plays this astrologist who's trying to help him out. It's very funny. Check it out if you've never seen it. In eighth place, I'm going to choose my favourite of the early funny comedies, and that is Love and Death, which is Woody Allen's very funny pastiche of the great Russian novels of Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Russian cinema with Diane Keaton. And it's just a perfect blend of all the things that made Woody Allen funny. There's a bit of slapstick. He's fired out of a cannon into a tent, which is hilarious. There's a bit of, sexual innuendo gags. I love the scene at the opera where he's making faces at the woman in the box opposite him. Very funny. And there's also some good literary gags as well at the expense of people like Tolstoy. Wheat. Fields of wheat. It's hilarious. My absolute favourite early Woody Allen comedy is actually Play It Again, Sam. The one where he's advised in his love life by this ghost of Humphrey Bogart. I don't know if you've ever seen that film. I think the first film where he was paired with Diane Keaton, I think I'm right in saying. I absolutely worship that film. I still think it's Woody Allen's funniest film and one of the funniest comedies I've ever seen. I don't include it on this list because nominally it was directed by Herbert Ross, though it's a Woody Allen film in all but name. The sequence, the blind date sequence with the Oscar Peterson record, I still think is one of the funniest set piece sequences in film. It's hilarious. In seventh place is Broadway Danny Rose. Now, Woody Allen in the 80s used to alternate. He used to alternate between these romantic comedy dramas like Annie Hall and Manhattan, and with little fable films or little oddball gimmick films. And Broadway Danny Rose is one of those, so you could miss it. But actually, it's a tremendously funny film, and it's one of his best written dramas and one of his best acted. He plays this agent for really crappy acts, and I love those scenes at the beginning. People with those kind of washboards, or people who make music out of wine glasses, all this sort of stuff. And Woody Allen's performance as this agent who's trying to help these people is quite touching. And then he gets involved with a gangster's mole, brilliantly played by Mia Farrow in a against type really, but she's very good in it. And it's a sort of caper movie. It's so good. It's beautifully made in black and white. It's a great big love letter to variety and music hall, and it's such a fun film. It's one of those films which Woody Allen films which the affection for it sort of creeps up on you through your age, and you realise actually that's one of my favourite Woody Allen movies. I also really like the next caper movie he made, which was The Purple Rose of Cairo, where Mia Farrow is a film fan, and then the people come out of the film and befriend her. Jeff Daniels, I think, becomes her lover. It's a very sweet film, but I actually prefer Broadway Danny Rose. In sixth place is one of the most underrated movies of the 1980s, and a film that still doesn't get its due, and that is Zelig. This was an immensely ambitious project of Woody Allen's, made in 1984. And what it is, he plays this guy, it's a pseudo-documentary about this guy who, through the 20th century, he's a chameleon. But he's not just a social chameleon, he's an actual chameleon. So he's talking to some, Democrat Republicans, and he starts acting like them and wearing the same clothes and looking the same as them. He's with some Nazis and he starts doing the Nazi salute. He's with some Greeks and he becomes Greek. It's very funny, and it's a comedy about a guy who just fits in and has no personality of his own. The critic Gilbert Adair, who I mentioned earlier, rather wittily said that this is a film about Woody Allen himself, a director who sort of copies other directors like Fellini, like Bergman, adopts their styles like Godard, adopts their styles without having a real style of his own. I'm not sure, I think that's a bit harsh on Woody Allen, but I see where he's coming from. I prefer to look at Zelig as a very witty satire on those people in society, often middle-class people, who just fit in with whatever the consensus is at the time. And in some ways, I think Zelig is a more uncomfortable film now, because I think it's more true of the society we live in now, a society of political correctness, a society where people are being almost conditioned by the media to learn what to say and what to think. I think it's more pungent, more powerful satire now than it was then. At the time, it was a bit of a one-joke movie, I think. But actually, Allen's idea of what it is to be a social and political and cultural chameleon is now becoming more and more of a complex and uncomfortable idea in our minds. And I think it's a comedy that's actually found its time. It was perhaps ahead of its time. It was also ahead of its time technically. I mean, what Woody Allen did in this film, getting his face put into old footage and everything, way before Forrest Gump, really impressive. Yet he never got credit for it. A bit unfair. Now we come to the top five. Now these are the five films that, for me, are the core of Woody Allen's filmmaking and the kind of films that he made best. Comedy dramas set in the world of upper middle class Manhattan. In fifth place is the film I've already mentioned, Husbands and Wives, which I think is his most mature, his most ambitious, most adult film. Perhaps not his most likeable, but it's a good film. It's about, a couple find out that another couple they're friends with are getting divorced, and it starts to affect the way they see themselves. Very good set of actors. Sidney Pollack, who was a well-known director in his own right, I actually think he was a better actor, and he's superb in this film. I love the moment when he comes back and finds that his wife's been having an affair with Liam Neeson. His acting in that is fantastic. It's so good. It's a bit light on the laughs. It's more of an adult, serious drama. But I really like Husbands and Wives. It's a very difficult film to get hold of these days. I think I'm right in saying it's never been released on Blu-ray. I don't know why. Perhaps it's because it was the film that was out during the Sun Yee scandal. In fourth place is Crimes and Misdemeanors. I always think Crimes and Misdemeanors is a bellwether test film of whether you like Woody Allen or you don't. Those people who like Woody Allen like it a lot. I love this film. I was passionate about it as a teenager and I still am. Those people who don't like Woody Allen can't see anything in it at all. It's a very schematic film. It has two stories running side by side. One is about Martin Landau, is an ophthalmologist who he's been having an affair with Angelica Houston, but she's threatening his life and his livelihood. So he has her killed, and he's wrestling with the guilt of that. Meanwhile, Woody Allen is a sort of independent filmmaker, wrestling with his love, Mia Farrow, potentially going to that man, Alan Alda. And the scene where Woody Allen sees that she's finally gone with Alan Alda, the look on his face, is one of those looks that every man knows when that woman you've liked goes with that guy you think is a complete pillock. I mean, it's just such a true moment. I'm sure it's true of women as well feel that way when they see some guys come with some woman that they think is an idiot. But it's just the look on his face is so true. I think this is the film that cuts to, the heart of Woody Allen's morality and the way he sees life. I find it very funny. I also find it very true. And I think the way that he balances the quite serious drama of the murder of Angelica Houston and the sort of light comedy of him trying to hold on to Mia Farrow, I just think it's brilliantly done. See, again, it's about economy. People like Rosenbaum criticise Woody Allen for not being, ultra raw and the depth of Cassavetes, but that's not what he wants to do. He wants to make a light drama. He criticises Woody Allen for not getting more political, not getting more sociocultural. But that's not what he wants to do. He wants to make a fable that anyone of any culture or class or politics can identify with. That's why his films have been so successful. Why should he do what Rosenbaum and these critics want him to do? He's doing his own métier and he's very good at it. And Crimes and Misdemeanors, I think, is a brilliant example of that. It's taking potentially serious material, treating it lightly, but still hitting all the dramatic beats and all the thematic beats all the way through. My third film that I'm going to choose is Annie Hall. Every Woody Allen fan loves this film because this is the film where he expresses his love for Diane Keaton. And Diane Keaton delivers with one of the great performances, I think, in American film. I love Diane Keaton in this film and I don't care who knows it. I mean, she gets to sing Old Times, that song. She sings it so beautifully. And then there's the lobster scene, la-di-da, the bit where she drives the car and she says, don't worry, I can get to the curb from here. That fantastic scene where they've got the subtitles underneath saying what they really think. Woody Allen basically set the template for romantic comedies for the next 40 years. No one likes to admit it these days, but it's all there. It's all there. And it's done brilliantly and beautifully and truthfully. It won the Oscar the year of the Star Wars, and it deserved it. It's a masterpiece. People like, going back to Rosenbaum again, he likes to point out that Woody Allen had some problems with the editing of it. The film was originally called Anadonia, and Woody Allen had devised almost a sort of chaotic sketch movie, not so much of a narrative film. But and it's often said that the editor helped him put it together. But so what? So what? All directors have had trouble. I mean, Hitchcock had trouble with the ending of The Birds, but eventually he made the right decisions. Woody Allen had trouble, but eventually he made the right decisions and he made a wonderful film that has charmed people for years. It seems to me, again, a rather churlish criticism. This is a film that mixes in animation, it mixes in sort of slapstick, romance, and it does it all beautifully. The editing in the end is gorgeous. The rhythm of it is so beautiful and perfect. And through it all, Diane Keaton is sublime. I've put two films above it. My second film is Manhattan. Lest we forget, Manhattan was the film that Andrew Sarris said was probably the best American film of the 1970s. Maybe an exaggeration. But you know what? He had a point. Because I think the reason why Andrew Sarris said this is because can you think of any other movie in the 1970s in America that so recaptures that confidence and brio and simple clarity of classic Hollywood? Because that's really what Manhattan is. It's a classic Hollywood template taken on modern New York people. And it does it with great confidence and great elan. And that's why Andrew Sarris liked it so much. These days, people are a bit worried about Manhattan because Woody Allen is having a relationship with a schoolgirl. That word is actually used by one of the characters in the dialogue. And we were a bit uncomfortable with the old Mariel Hemingway episode, though for years, no one talked about it. I never thought anything about it. My parents, my father, I used to watch Woody Allen with my father. We used to enjoy it together. No one ever thought it was uncomfortable. It was just part of the story, which is, I suppose, telling of how social mores change. I love this film. Again, Diane Keaton is sublime. I love the bit where she's having that conversation with her ex-lover, Yale. And she says, God, I'm beautiful. I could sleep the whole of MIT if I wanted to. And then she ends the conversation. That fascinated me as a teenager when she said that. And then she ends the conversation with, fuck off, Yale. I think that is the best fuck off in movies. Go back and check it out. The way she says it, it's so brilliant. It's a great moment. There are so many moments in this movie that I love. But I think the moment that those people who like Manhattan really cherish is that moment where Woody Allen is laid back on his sofa and he's talking to his tape recorder about all the things that he loves, the things that keep him going, the things that keep him from committing suicide. Apples and Pears by Cézanne, Potato Head Blues, and then he goes, Amy's face, or I can't remember the name of the character that Mariel Hemingway plays, but her face. And then he puts down the microphone, the music bleeds in. That is a moment of perfection. I subtitled this movie for the deaf and people of hearing loss for television. And subtitling something in depth really shows you how good a filmmaker is. Allen's use of music, old Gershwin standards through that film, I think I'm right in saying that almost all the music used in it is Gershwin. It's so clever and it's so on point and it's so perfect in the editing. And then there's that wonderful scene where he runs all those blocks to see her. And they have that fantastic dialogue scene which ends on an ambiguous note. That is great, confident filmmaking. No one can tell me that is the filmmaking of a mediocre filmmaker, of a tentative filmmaker. In that film, Woody Allen knew exactly what he was doing. Every character is true, every scene is perfect. But it's still not my favourite. I'm going to choose as my absolute favourite Woody Allen, Hannah and Her Sisters. Partly because it came along at a time of my life, I was 14 years of age, and its discussion of life, the universe and everything, marriage, falling in love, all that sort of thing, was also fresh and fascinating to me. I loved seeing Michael Caine in a Woody Allen film, and he's really good in it. He deserved the Oscar for it. I love the way Woody Allen takes all these disparate actors, Michael Caine, Max von Sydow, Mia Farrow, Diane Wiest, and he bunches them together and you absolutely believe in them. The economy of the way he tells the story is superb. And the way he mixes elements. That argument in the middle of the film between Michael Caine and Mia Farrow, where it really goes dark. It's a really serious argument. And there's it finishes on that shot of Mia Farrow looking into the darkness, completely lost. That's as good a depiction of a marriage breaking up as ever I've seen. And yet the next scene, we'll be looking at Woody Allen being hypochondriac and thinking he's got all sorts of diseases, and we'll be laughing. The next scene will be moved and there'll be something romantic. And he does it all effortlessly. That's incredibly difficult to do. To criticise him for not going more and more rawness into the marriage of, say, Michael Caine and Mia Farrow in that scene is to miss the point. That's not what he's trying to do. He's trying to make a charming, light comedy drama, but still hitting all the dramatic beats it needs to, all the thematic beats it needs to. That scene with Mia Farrow and Michael Caine is brilliantly acted and genuinely devastating. But it doesn't mean that the next scene can't be very funny. That's life after all, isn't it? We move from the devastating to the funny. I've never seen it done better in any other film than Hannah and Her Sisters. And that economy and that confidence is something that I deeply admire. So that's my top 10 of Woody Allen. I'd love to hear what yours is and what your feelings are about Woody Allen, positive or negative. And if you like my comments, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe.